Yes, we've been having electronic problems today, but you know what? We're just used to making do, and so we're all here with a heart trying to just make it happen.
Well, so maybe I'll just get started, and can everybody more or less hear me? I'm going to talk briefly and let you concentrate on your lunch because we've had a wonderful early program. Right, I'll do that. Upstairs. Well, first, it's a wonderful privilege to be here. What I'd like to do first is to recognize the people who put this program on. Why, Vaughn, Cather, are you in the room? All right, Jim Turner. Jim, I know you're in the room. You were. There you are. Kent Rowe from Occupy Wichita. And then we have Sam, who's here behind the camera from our Sierra Club National Media team, and Kate Paululi, who has been behind the scenes in Washington helping put this together. So hats off to all of you for doing this. This is a tremendously important event, and people all around the country are watching this program and looking at it as something that is going to help us continue to build the momentum. So thank you for all of your work. Very important. I'd like to just say a couple of words about what this means to me. First of all, I've been part of the Sierra Club's leadership in the last couple of years. It's been looking at how we need to build power to pursue our mission. We do not have enough numbers internally in the organization. We represent 1.4 million members and supporters, and we're building, but we can't do it alone. And we've recognized this, that in our efforts to confront the domination of the fossil fuel industries over our environment and over our politics, we need to join forces. And so a couple of years ago, that recognition led us to recognize that we needed to get involved in movement building. Well, fast forward to last year, and what we see with Occupy is something that we couldn't have started on our own, or I'm not sure we had the sense, and we didn't have the internal diversity to bring that about. But we immediately recognized that here was an opportunity to join hands around shared objectives of confronting that dominance over our environment and really taking back this country and taking back our future. So we very quickly reached out, and in a number of communities around the country, we found that we had common ground in going after local projects that were very polluting. A lot of these would be coal-fired power plants and other efforts to increase our exports of coal to other countries so that they would in turn be beholden to coal-fired power. So we've had a great and growing relationship with Occupy. In the fall, it was just tremendously important that the Occupy movement was a big part of raising the profile of the Keystone Pipeline to really, something that was calling on the president to change course, to recognize that he really had to stand up to big oil and stop this pipeline. The first thing was with the hearings that were held by the State Department. Occupy was a major contributor to turning out the very significant numbers at those hearings and making this a real issue for the public at large. We saw that this wasn't just a few old white people speaking at these hearings. This was a broad cross-section of the American public. And we saw that in Washington with the hearing there, where Occupy activists, actually in Occupy Washington, D.C., they went to the State Department and held places overnight for out-of-town speakers coming in. And I had the fortune to speak because one of the Occupy activists stayed all night in the State Department to hold a space in line. So I was personally grateful. And then with the Encircle the White House event, it was just tremendously, it was a wonderful experience, a wonderful visual, but a very important signal to the president that looking out over that group of people, it was, a real diversity of people, all ages, all colors, people of all walks of life, and much harder to dismiss than a very homogeneous environmental community. So those are important things to remember. Why are we here? Why are we in Wichita? Well, to me, this is where extreme oil meets extreme politics. And that's what that's what this is all about, is really putting a very bright light on the fact that this is where a lot of things are emanating around trying to hold us back with a 19th century energy technology and trying to dominate our politics. So just a couple of points about extreme oil, trying to build on some of the very articulate speakers you've heard this morning, and it's tough to follow all that's been said, but as far as extreme oil is concerned, we all know that as the more readily available oil is disappearing, we're going to greater and greater extremes to find it. In my role with the Sierra Club, I have had the privilege to visit various parts of the country, and a lot of times it's associated with an event, sometimes with a meeting, but a lot of times with an event. And when I think of extreme oil, I think of going to visit the Yellowstone River in Montana and seeing the river afterwards. The spill happened, and this was a pipeline, an Exxon pipeline, that broke, and before they could stop the flow of oil, there had been a real discharge of oil downstream. Really, by comparison with some of the other spills, this was 1,500 barrels of oil, but that much oil can spread pretty far downstream before they could shut it off, and there were tremendous wildlife impacts, and they had to shut off local water supplies. But the thing that was the most compelling to me was to visit the farmland nearby and see the oil in the ryegrass and know that it is going to take a long time for that oil to be dissipated. How do you clean up a massive acreage of rye field, that's covered with oil? Let me get back to the reason I mentioned it, but then the second visit, which was heartbreaking, was to go to the Gulf Coast after the Macondo blowout and see the results of the beginnings of the oil washing up on shore and see all the tar balls. By the way, just because the media has forgotten, those tar balls are still coming up on shore. Those impacts are still happening, and we don't know how long it is going to take for that ecosystem to recover. So as much as the focus now is on BP, paying whatever is they're going to be charged and walking away, we know that people there are going to be impacted in terms of their livelihoods for a long time. And third, I'll mention being in Copenhagen, actually, and visiting with First Nations people, talking about tar sands and talking about the poisoning in their communities as a result of the toxic spills, the toxic leaching of toxins into their drinking water. All these have in common something that was mentioned this morning, which is that those communities, those states where this is happening, they are under the domination of the oil industry, and they cannot control the influence that that industry has on them. So you take something like the Yellowstone spill, and the settlement with Exxon for that was $1.6 billion. What is that to Exxon? $1.6 million. Nothing. And so, what's left is, it's chump change. And what's left is all of those farmers who have non-productive land for who knows how long. Same in the Gulf. These settlement fines are nothing to an industry that's raking in billions. So we get to extreme oil with the tar sands, and I know that I'm having the opportunity to stay with Jane Byrne right over there. Jane, she was talking about the fact that she's been calling or urging people to come to this event, and people are scratching their heads. You know, what exactly does Koch Industries have to do with the Keystone Pipeline? And of course, Koch Industries is saying they have nothing to do with the Keystone XL pipeline. And people also, a lot of people aren't aware of what tar sands oil is. So let's be clear about this. Keystone XL pipeline isn't Koch Industries' pipeline, but Koch Industries produces, they refine 25% of the tar sands oil that's imported in this country. So whatever is done in the way of, with this pipeline is going to directly influence Canadian development of tar sands oil. So that's a close connection there. And then, you know, the other thing is, of course, the right-wing agenda that they're funding that is producing the kind of views that we have in Congress about this whole project and turning it into this football with the payroll tax deduction, you know, just making it something that was going to be really used to challenge Obama's decision on this pipeline. Well, so I want to get into tar sands and, you know, and just how destructive it is, so we're clear about that. When we say extreme oil, what we're talking about is the most destructive form of oil production there is on the planet. As you know, a lot of you are aware, they've taken pictures of tar sands oil production from outer space. So it is something we can see from the upper atmosphere. I want to read you a description of tar sands oil that was, you know, one of the most compelling for me from 2008. And this is Todd Paglia from Forest Ethics. He was writing in 2008, "The tar sands are what you get when you combine 18th century nonchalance about toxic substances, 21st century greed, and medieval sensibilities about the ethical treatment of human beings." Yeah, that's right. And that's what Koch Industries is now producing. Remember, they're a prolific polluter already, and we've seen in your material talks about the spills that they turned a blind eye to for years, and then of course, what did they get in the way of a fine for those? A settlement of $30 million. I hope that their books, you know, go to that number of decibels, because you know, if you're raking in billions of dollars, 30 million is really not going to show up, and it's really not going to be an incentive to clean up your act. Tar sands oil production it's poisoning people and wildlife now. There are toxic air emissions, there are toxic waste ponds that right now are covering, it's 50 square miles of Canada with these toxic waste lagoons. Drinking water sources are contaminated, particularly for the indigenous peoples there. And of course we have the huge challenge that this is not only the most carbon intensive oil, but it is also destroying vast amounts of the Canadian boreal forest. And so we are mining the very resource that is helping to capture all of the carbon that, you know, that we are putting into the air. And this is just unbelievably naive and counterproductive to where we need to be going. So one of the things that some of you may have seen was that earlier this week, the Canadian government, Canadian federal government, established, or they agreed on a memorandum of understanding with Alberta. And they announced this, and it was well-timed because they knew that Occupy KochTown was happening. They developed this memorandum of understanding to develop some new technology to control the air emissions from tar sands production. I guess we can all go home now. Problem solved. They said, this was in their announcement, we are committed to continue working with the government of Alberta to overcome the unique technological and environmental challenges associated with oil sands development. That was their Minister of Natural Resources. Okay, so don't worry. Help is on the way. They're going to solve the air emissions problem from tar sands production. Just trust them. And they're going to use some extreme technology because, of course, the more extreme the source of oil gets, the more extreme the technology has to be to fix it. Although, you know, now that we've seen what happened in the Gulf, we have a little bit of a concern about just how good the technology is going to be. We know there's a better way. That's why all of you are here. We know that the Keystone XL pipeline is not just about tar sands oil. It is about taking back our future. And so, you know, this is very important that we seize this moment with this issue. But it also, as you know, as Richard, who's taking a picture, you know, as he was very clear, this is about solidarity across a whole spectrum of issues, because it's not just about a clean environment. It is about a just society, access to good jobs, and a future for our children and grandchildren. So our first step is to draw a line on this pipeline, and then we need to build our ranks. We need to build this movement so that we are demanding accountability in our elections. We want people who are voting for the public interest, and if they're not voting for the public interest, what are they doing there? And then we need to get, as you know, it is so compelling, and thank you for the Move to Amend presentation, because it is so clear we have got to get money out of politics and take back control of our democracy. So thank you very much. I'll let you return to eating. I appreciate the attention.